Hi, everyone. Today we'll be talking about Charles Lindholm's article, Authenticity, Anthropology, and the Sacred. This article dives into anthropology's long-standing fascination with authenticity, what it means, how it's defined, and why it matters. We'll talk about how anthropology has historically searched for pure cultures, why this approach is problematic, and what the modern perspective is. Before diving in, let's start with the bottom line up front, or blue bluff, however you want to pronounce it. Lindholm's article examines how anthropologists have historically sought out authentic cultures, often romanticizing them as untouched or pure. He critiques this idealized approach, showing how it failed to recognize that cultures are constantly evolving. He argues that we need a more balanced perspective, one that acknowledges both the constructed nature of cultural identities and the deeply felt significance they hold for people. Charles Lindholm was a professor of anthropology at Boston University. Anthropology, as we know, is the study of human societies and cultures. Lindholm's work focuses on how people define authenticity, whether in religious traditions, political ideologies, or personal identity. His research has helped shape our understanding of how cultures are represented and perceived in a more globalized world. His article revolves around one big question: why are we so drawn to authenticity? Authenticity refers to the quality of being genuine, or true to origin. Whether it's in art, culture, or identity, we tend to believe some things are more real than others. Anthropology has long struggled with this idea, sometimes romanticizing certain cultures as pure or untouched. But is this really the case? And what are the consequences of this supposed romanticization? One way we see authenticity at play is through sacralization, the act of assigning something sacred or transcendent in value. Think of religious relics, holy sites, or even cultural traditions passed down through generations. In medieval Europe, there was a practice known as furta sacra, which literally means sacred theft. Religious relics were stolen from one place and revered in another simply because they were believed to hold divine power. In its own way, anthropology has done something somewhat similar, seeking out pure or sacred cultures and treating them as untouchable ideals. But is this pursuit problematic? Early anthropology, influenced by thinkers like Johann Gottfried Herder, painted cultures as isolated and pure. Herder was a philosopher who argued that every culture has a unique genius, a spirit that made it distinct. This led anthropologists to seek out untainted indigenous groups, believe they represented humanity in its most original form. The issue? Cultures are never static. They evolve, interact, and adapt. Romanticizing purity often meant ignoring real historical and political processes like colonialism and migration, which absolutely affect and shape culture. Beyond theory, anthropologists themselves played into this illusion. By embedding themselves in cultures, they aim to experience authentic ways of life firsthand. Reifying cultures means treating it as a fixed, unchanging entity, when in reality, culture is fluid. While this immersive approach is certainly great and allows for a deeper understanding, it also created the false impression that they could access an unfiltered, timeless version of a culture. In that sense, anthropology has moved away from searching for authentic cultures. Instead, scholars recognize that cultures are constantly adapting due to factors like migration, technological change, and historical influences. Lindholm emphasized that the main job of anthropologists today, following our tradition as self-conscious practitioners of furta sacra, is to record, criticize, and analyze early manifestation and vicissitudes of this transmuting process. I quite like his line, "The sacred is where you find it." Essentially, anthropologists' role is no longer just about observing or documenting so-called pure culture. It's about understanding how cultures shift, evolve, and redefine what is sacred or meaningful over time. But this raises a new challenge. If everything is constantly changing, how do we ensure that we still respect the cultural meanings that people hold dear? Lindholm presents a bit of a paradox. If idealizing authenticity is a problem, but rejecting it entirely is also flawed, where do we land? People feel a deep connection to their traditions and identities. These things feel and are very real to them. So, how do we as anthropologists balance recognizing cultural change while still honoring the lived experiences and deeply held beliefs of the people that we study? Lindholm's work reminds us that authenticity isn't absolute. It's something that we create. Romanticizing cultures does in fact do more harm than good, but rejecting authenticity altogether can leave us disconnected from meaning. Anthropology's challenge is to strike a balance between these two extremes, recognizing both the constructed nature of culture and its personal significance. So the question becomes, how can we as anthropologists appreciate the complexity and sacredness of cultural practices without falling into the traps of oversimplification, such as essentialism or getting caught up in political agenda? To frame this, think about a real-world example where the idea of authenticity is hotly debated. This could be in the realms of culture, media, tourism, or personal identity. For instance, consider the debate around Indigenous art and whether it can be truly authentic when produced for the global market, or the authenticity of cultural practices when they're commercialized for tourism, which can literally be found everywhere around the world. And how does this reflect the broader tensions between preserving tradition and adapting to change? When analyzing authenticity, we need to ask, whose voices are being prioritized in the conversation? Are we listening to those whose culture is being represented, or is authenticity being defined by external forces, often based on stereotyped or preconceived notions? How does this shape our understanding of the dynamic nature of culture? Please pick a question and comment below. Oh, here are the references. I included the references as well in the handout, but I do recommend reading the JSTOR article on the undercover monk who literally went undercover to steal relics. Anyways, I'm looking forward to this week, and I will talk to you soon.